I was in Maravan Province, 1951, deep in the islands. We weren't out there chasing ghosts. We were sent to run radio lines, map muddy trails, and wait for the Japanese. But the jungle didn't care about our orders. The locals kept whispering one word like it carried a curse: awang. They said it could smile at you in broad daylight like a friendly neighbor, then rip itself apart and fly through your roof at night. Wings black as tarpaulin, tongue long enough to stab. We laughed it off as village talk, old stories. Then one of ours vanished, his rifle left sunk in the mud, his dog tag swinging from a vine where no tracks went. And the night I saw those red eyes in the tree line, that's when the laughter dried up. Before we shipped deeper inland, the folks back home would probably tell you to like and subscribe, drop a comment about where you're watching from. But out there, nothing felt that simple. We dropped into Maravan late in '41, right before the world burst into flames. Heat like a wet blanket, air thick with rot and salt, mangroves everywhere, roots like claws reaching out of the earth. The villagers watched us from their doorways. No smiles, just measuring eyes. We were 12 men, a tiny radio detachment with more mud than glory to our name. I carried the battered radio. Calloway was the sergeant, loud voice, louder chewing tobacco. Thought he knew every trick a jungle could pull. Harris was the kid, freckles and a grin like the war was some kind of summer job. Doc Nonner smoked too much and swore his lungs would outlive the rest of us. 2 local scouts came along, Sergeant Domingo and young Reyes. They knew the trails, knew what not to touch, spoke less than the trees. Our mission looked simple on paper: run a wire along the ridge, keep a schedule with HQ, cut a few goat paths as fallback routes if the Japanese pushed down hard. We hauled in light: rifles, rucks, coils of antenna wire, 2 kerosene lamps, and enough salt pork to cripple a man's gut. We set camp by a mangrove inlet where the ground sucked at your boots if you stood too long. A huge bent tree leaned over us. The locals had a name for it: bollet, twisted like it still couldn't decide which direction to grow. I hated that tree on sight. So did Domingo. He wouldn't walk under it after dark, whispered a short prayer into his cough. That first night he drew a ring of salt around the radio tent. Didn't say a word, just poured and patted like a craftsman closing a seam. Calloway barked a laugh, asking if we were keeping ghosts out. Domingo didn't answer, just staring at the roots. I logged the weather, barometer down a hair, wind off the sea, strange bird call at 2 a.m. I wrote it down as if putting it on paper made it normal. It didn't. You know how a place gets inside you? First the smell, diesel on canvas, fish drying somewhere, sweet rot where mangrove leaves stew. Then the sounds, cicadas like saw blades, night birds, water sucking at roots. And beneath it all, a hollow quiet like the jungle was holding its breath to see if we'd notice. We didn't. Not that first day. We were busy being soldiers. Stakes, wire, radio checks, bad jokes about chow, pretending we were already dreaming of home. On the second evening, we walked into the village. A neat line of stilt houses, bamboo floors slatted so air could climb up and snakes couldn't. A woman with smoke in her hair stared at my boots like they'd personally offended her. The barangay captain met us halfway, tight jaw, polite nods. They fed us rice and fish stew that tasted like the sea bit back. Kids stared at our rifles. A pregnant girl, Sibel, kept both hands on her stomach like she was hiding a small bird there. The midwife came at dusk, Lola Marta. Small, stern, and nobody interrupted her. She waved me into a dark hut corner and pointed to a window lined nicely with fresh salt. "You soldiers," she said softly, "do not laugh, not in front of me." I told her I wouldn't. Truth was, my mouth had gone dry. She held up a braid of old garlic like yellowed teeth. "Over the door, salt every gap, vinegar under the bed, stingray tail by the threshold." She tapped the black lash hanging from a peg. "The bunt peck. If it crosses, you strike. The
The sting burns it like fire. What does? Harris asked too loud. She stared at him like a teacher at the slowest boy. As swung. I didn't know the word. She looked unsurprised. She laid it out like a checklist, not a story. Woman by day, smile like yours, hands that buy fish. At night, it changes. Sometimes leaves its legs behind and flies, top half only, wings like a bat. Sometimes it crawls like a dog or pig, but wrong, thin, hungry. Its tongue is a long black thread. It slips through roof slats. It drinks. It feeds. It prefers the unborn, the weak, the lonely. She said, listen for the sound. Tick, tick. If it is loud, it is far. If it is faint, it is near. It is a trick. Do not be fooled. The captain spoke from the doorway. Rules, he said. Salt, garlic, vinegar, ash. Lines it would not cross, things it would not look at. He didn't say mirrors. He didn't have to. They gave us their stories like bullet points. A water buffalo drained to gray leather. Tracks that began human and turned to pig in 10 steps. A woman who refused vinegar. Dogs hiding under bamboo floors and crying. A corpse that looked normal until washwater showed the liver gone. A still lantern borrowed by a woman. And later, a stillborn child, white and hollow. And Sibel's sister, 7 months along, too afraid to sleep. Back at camp, we laughed, because that's what men do when they don't want something to stick. Jungle fairy tales. Old women keeping daughters inside after dark. Calloway spat and called it nonsense. Domingo didn't laugh. He strung ash across our doorway and tucked garlic into the rafters. Gave us a look that meant, humor me. I did. Harris hung 2 cloves from his helmet strap like a clown. Later, Reyes told me quietly, it is not all one thing. Many shapes, many names. You need to know only one truth. It is patient. Patient for what? I asked. For you to forget the rules. I took the 2 to 4 watch because I never sleep well the first week anywhere. The jungle hum crawled into your ears, moonlight skinned the water in silver. The radio was warm against my thigh. Bugs burned themselves in the lamp's yellow cone. The noise at first was comforting. Frogs like leaky pipes, insects sawing, a nightjar popping like a cork every few breaths, surf rumbling far off. You could time your heartbeat by it. Then the jungle shut its mouth. Not peace, absence. The kind of quiet right before a doctor says your name. Every hair on my arms rose. The smell shifted. Rot, overripe fruit, and something metallic, like a tin cup full of old rain. My tongue tasted like pennies. A warm drop hit my cheek. I wiped it off and told myself a gecko had lost its manners. Tick, tick, a faint metronome under a blanket. Loud meant far, quiet meant near. The sound said far, my bones said near. I stood slowly. The lamp flame bent, then straightened, like something had breathed on it. But the air didn't move. Sweat crawled down my ribs. Something crossed the path beyond the antenna line. Pig, I told myself, but the legs were
too long in the limbs, like a kid wearing his father's pants. It didn't trot. It shuffled, like it was remembering how. The head turned and kept turning too far. I blinked and it slipped behind the bala tree. I tried to laugh. It came out like a cough. I told myself to quit acting scared. Check the wire, keep busy, pretend none of it happened. The tick-tick faded. The trick said that meant farther. My body called it a lie. A burst of feathers brushed past my ear. I jerked so hard my knees smacked the lamp table and the glass chimed. Fruit bat, I told myself. Just a big fruit bat. They eat guava and they make fools jumpy. I forced a breath in, let it out slow. Almost felt brave. Harris came to relieve me. Still had a string of garlic hanging on his chin strap. He looked like a kid trying too hard at a Halloween party.
"Your turn," I said, keeping my voice steady. He squinted up at the roof. "Corporal, don't laugh. I think someone's up there." We both stared. Nothing but darkness and the thin lines of the rafters. Nothing but our own breathing. We didn't wake the others. We should have. He was on the perimeter at 3:47. I know because I wrote it down. Harris had a good, steady walk, looked back too much, but that's better than not enough. At 4:09, I whistled our 2-note call. Got nothing back. That wasn't unusual. Men took a piss, men got distracted by smokes. I waited a minute, then another. Then the minute stretched too long. At 4:16, we went to get him. Line search, just like the manual, 5 paces apart, lanterns low. Domingo and Reyes read the mud like it was a letter. It told the story. Harris walked, he stopped, his heels dug in, like something had yanked him back by the collar. Then the prints changed. Human heels melted into something splayed, split down the center. Not quite pig, not quite anything. The tracks wandered toward the bala tree and quit, like a pen running out of ink. We found his rifle sunk in the muck, magazine gone, sling ripped clean. A strap of webbing hung 8 feet up a bamboo stalk, threaded there, neat as if someone had used a ladder. I hate that part even now. Makes me feel small. The smell hit us next. Not dead yet, but sweet, like fish sauce left in the sun, with something rotten underneath. Milner gagged, then cursed, like swearing could scrub the stink from his lungs. We widened the search. Tin cups on trip lines clinked on the far side of camp, though the leaves never moved. The antenna wire hummed, though the radio sat cold. The jungle stayed silent. That was the worst part. Silence that felt like listening. At dawn, the villagers arrived together. The captain marked our doorway with an ash cross. Women pounded garlic like they meant to break the bowls. The midwife walked the edges of camp, scattering vinegar until the air stung. "Someone invited it," she said. Wouldn't look at me. "Invited what?" Calloway snapped. Tired and furious and scared. "Something wore a face and smiled at you in daylight. It checked your salt. It saw where your line is thin. At night it came through that place." I wanted her to stop. She wasn't wrong. I made it worse. Reyes found a tuft of hair by the bala tree. Not pig, not human, coarse and wrong. He wrapped it in oiled paper and handed it to me like I'd know what to do with it. I dropped it into a pouch and made sure not to let my skin touch it. Someone whispered that a pregnant girl 2 villages over had been found at dawn. Alive. Her belly wasn't. No one looked toward Sibel's house. We sat on ammo boxes and didn't talk. I wrote, "Personnel missing, PV.J. Harris," on my pad. My hand almost wrote swung. I made it stop, and I wrote, "Bandit activity possible." And it felt like lying to the air. That night we prepared an ambush. If it was men, men bleed. If it was an animal, animals die. If it was something else, at least we'd see its shape and give it a name. Names make things smaller. We hung lanterns low, strung trip lines with tin cups. Salt rings around the tents and the radio. Domingo looked at our rifles like they were toys and handed each of us a stingray tail lash, for when bullets lie. He didn't smile. The jungle felt like it was watching us get ready. It didn't start with shouting or gunfire. It started with the cups clanking while the leaves stayed still. It started when the radio wire hummed a thin, glassy note. It started when the lamp flame pinched into a blue needle and stretched tall, like someone leaned in and inhaled. I saw eyes first. 2 red coals low in the brush, too far apart for a man, too steady for any animal. They blinked sideways like a fish. When the lantern swung, the eyes didn't change, they just watched. I told my finger not to tighten on the trigger. It didn't listen. Branches above groaned. Something heavy and jointed moved along the ridgepole. The roof shifted under its weight. Then a shadow leaned forward, and an elbow, or something like one, poked out at the wrong angle. The tongue is what got me. Thin, dark, it threaded between the bamboo slats and tasted the air above Milner's kit. Each touch made a tiny wet tap, 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 like a nail on wood. Close, too close. And the tick-tick out by the river said, far, far away. My mind split into two, and both halves wanted to run. Reyes snapped his stingray lash upward. The crack split the air. The night answered from above, not outside. A shriek like a bat trying to scream like a woman. The tongue vanished, the roof sagged as something lifted off. Thatch crumbled in a little shower of sticks and dust, and a smell like rancid meat. I threw salt, useless, like tossing snow at a house fire. We fired, not wild at first. Short pairs, controlled, the brush thrashed by the trail. A shape came out, refusing to make sense. For a second it looked like a woman, cut off at the waist. Ribs flared like broken barrel slats, wings folding with a wet canvas sound. Then it was just a shadow. Then nothing. My ears rang. The jungle found its voice, then swallowed it again. Something hit Ortega, not claws, not teeth, but like a hook made of pure hate. He dropped, gasping. Calloway dragged him back and fell when the thatch caved behind them. Something brushed my shoulder in passing. I expected heat. I felt cold, bone-deep cold, outside to in. That's wrong. You get hit in a fight, you feel hot. I swung the butt of my rifle, hit nothing, but air and a stink I never want to know again. We drove it back with chaos. Salt flung in fistfuls, lashes cracking, hitting something unseen and making a sound like oil spitting on a pan. The thing shrieked again, farther or nearer. Impossible to tell. The sound lies. A pig stood on the path watching us. Its eyes were dead. It didn't blink for a full minute. When it finally turned its head, its neck bent the wrong way, behind where the joint should have been. Then it was gone, like someone erased it. The cups went still, the wire stopped singing, the roof settled with a soft sigh. We counted. We always count once the panic fades. Ortega, bad gash, shocky. Reyes, a cut that looked like 3 long points. Milner patched them up with shaking hands and told us to shut up. We did. Roosters would have crowed, if any were alive. They weren't. 3 hens in the coop were just white meat on wood, peeled clean, no blood in the dirt. I stared at that too long. At dawn, we swept the perimeter. In the dust near the radio tent was a trail, like someone dragged a rope dipped in dark oil.
The marks
wandered
on
toward
the
the bala
bamboo
tree
weren't
and
from
stopped
claws, the way you'd normally picture them. Whatever made them had pressed in and dragged back, leaving grooves that felt too deliberate. A smear on one of the leaves looked like blood, but it didn't bead the way blood should. We bagged it anyway. Soldiers put things in evidence bags when they have no idea what else to do with them. The villagers came back. They didn't say, "We warned you," not out loud. They reset the ash and salt around the posts, packed more garlic into our rafters, and spat vinegar and an X across the doorway. Marta told us nobody should sleep flat on their backs. "Protect the belly," she said. We didn't argue. Men like to believe they're above rules. This time, we weren't. Sable cried without making a sound. Domingo wouldn't look at me when I asked him what he thought. He kept his eyes on the tree. "We should go," he said, like he was talking about the weather instead of giving an order. By then, nobody was laughing anymore. Even Calloway had stopped. The captain said the wind would turn. He meant more than the wind. By mid-morning, we burned whatever we couldn't carry. That's a sin in a place where people grow their walls from grass and hope. But we did it anyway.
We buried whatever wouldn't burn. We snapped the antenna, coiled the wire, and left the poles behind. We filled our pockets with salt and ammunition, because both felt like plans. We started toward the coast in a long line. The trail was narrow as a vein. You could hear the water long before you ever saw it, and what we did see was worse. I walked third, and I kept looking for a second set of footprints behind Harris's last steps. I kept not seeing them until I almost tripped on my own. Halfway down the ridge, a ratty vine hung across the path like a clothesline. At the end of it, swinging like a slow pendulum, were Harris's dog tags. No prints in the mud, no marks of anyone climbing, just metal with his name stamped on it, clicking in the breeze. We didn't take them. I'm not proud of that. I'm not ashamed either. Nobody wanted to stand under that vine longer than it took to say his name. We reached the beach by dusk, built a small fire out of wet driftwood that only smoked and refused to flame, ate hard bread that made our teeth hurt. Nobody talked about the hens, or the marks, or the tongue. I wrote the incident report by lamplight, the pad balanced on my knee. Hostile species unknown. Night activity. Missing Private J. Harris. Presumed captured or lost. Evidence suggests large bat predation. Recommend avoiding valley terrain. Maintain light discipline. Salt use. I crossed out the salt part. It looked wrong on a U.S. Army form. Rain came in sharp strips that made you put a hat on and then ripped it right off. We passed the bottle and watched the dark move. Sometimes it moved on its own. Sometimes I think it didn't. Sometimes I think I'm lying now, the way I lied on that report. 2 mornings later, a runner came with news. Bombs up north, landings on Luzon, the world finally shifting its weight. New orders, new codes, new cover sheets. Men counting trucks and trying not to count odds. We turned our little outpost over to a lieutenant so fresh his bars still shined like he believed paperwork could stop bullets. He held up my evidence bag and asked what was in it. I told him I didn't know. He wrote "dispose" in pencil and set it aside like old chow. We walked back through the village to say the kind of goodbye you say when you're leaving people to face their own monsters. Sable's door had more salt than wood. Garlic hung like metals. The midwife put a stingray tail in my hand. I tried giving it back, but she folded my fingers over it until the bones pressed. "For when your bullets lie," she said, then faded into the smoke until she was part of the house. Domingo left his whip hooked over their door. He finally looked me in the eye. "You won't write this," he said. I told him no. We started up the trail again, the rocks feeling heavier than they should. Clouds stacked over the sea. The belete back at camp sat in memory like a black thumb. If I turned just right, I could hide it behind a palm trunk. That trick only worked if I didn't breathe. The road south was full of rumors, landings, retreats, towns that would be ghosts by Christmas. We folded into a larger unit and lost our smaller shape. That happens in war. Edges blur. In Alo, a captain took my report and filed it under things that don't matter anymore. I watched him stamp it and had the stupid thought that ink outlasts men. Maybe that's why we write. Maybe that's why I'm talking now. Calloway offered me a smoke. I said no, and then took one anyway. Milner told a joke about a priest and a fisherman and botched the timing. Reyes sat on a crate sharpening a knife that didn't have an edge left to find. Domingo stared at the sky like it owed him a different story. I signed the ledger where it said missing in action, Private J. Harris. I put my initials neat. The ink smudged the bottom line.
A small thing. It stuck with me more than the smell of blood. There's a way men like us end stories around fires. You say you still hear a sound some nights. You say something followed you. You say you wake up with mud on your feet. I won't give you that. I won't pretend this ends clean. What happened next was simple. We followed orders. We moved south. We lost men to bullets and fever, and the kind of luck that comes on trucks with bald tires. We sent and received messages, ate rice and dried fish, missed home until it hurt. When and now, in some treeless clearing with no shadows, I remembered a hand on my shoulder and felt cold down to the bone. Had to move to a different chair. Years later, a museum man asked if I had any artifacts from the islands. I told him I'd lost everything. That was a lie. I still had the stingray tail, brittle, black, the handle cracked. It lives in a drawer now. Not a shrine, just a place. Sometimes I take it out and oil the leather so it doesn't turn to dust. That's not magic. That's maintenance. If you want a moral, I don't have one. If you want a monster, take your pick. Maybe it was a bat that learned people like stories and hid inside one. Maybe it was a story that learned to wear a bat. Maybe it was hunger with a face. We left the Cape under gray skies and orders we didn't get to argue with. Rain pinned down the dust and made the world smell clean for about a minute. The Belete, when I think of it now, isn't a tree anymore. It's a place the trail stops, and something that isn't me waits to see if I forget the rules. I won't, but rules only matter if anything else does. The morning we moved out, a clerk slid me a form and a pen. I wrote what they told me to write. Unit, date, location, location. One line for Harris. The ink bled where the privilege had gotten damp. The clerk didn't look at me. He had 50 more names and a truck to catch. That's how it ended for us in the Cape. Not with a bang, not with a campfire twist. Just a wet signature, a dull stamp in a ledger, and the sound of trucks grinding their gears as they pulled away from a place that runs on its own time.